There's a huge difference between know and I don't know. And I think when you're at that extremely vulnerable period of, being in the acute ward post a huge physical trauma, hope is something that we need to thrive on. And I think the lack of that is what was my driving force to make sure that if I was going to have any kind of a life after this injury, then I needed to work for it. And within myself, it was, give it all I've got as opposed to just give up.
Hey there, everyone. It's another episode of the Few Podcast with me, Boo, and the wonderful Sean. How are you, mate?
Awesome, mate. Really looking forward to today's discussion.
These discussions can be somewhat draining sometimes. I find that it can be quite intense, some of these conversations.
Absolutely.
I've got a feeling today is going to be another one of those.
Quite potentially, but also, I suppose, very eye-opening and determining what it takes to actually overcome, adversity and move forward in a positive way.
Adversity which many of us wouldn't even have any familiarity with personally or even closely. So without any further ado, we're talking to Rhiannon Tracey today. Hello, Rhiannon. Thanks so much for joining us on the Few Podcast. How's your day going?
So
it's a bit hot where you are.
Me, guys.
Yeah. A little bit hot.
Welcome.
Oh, it's a scorcher, but who can complain? Bring on summer.
No, that's right. I was going to say, I guess with the experiences that you've had since the early or 2000s there, and your familiarity with discomfort, being a little bit sweaty and hot is probably the least trial that you've had to deal with, right?
Oh, look, least of my worries, but one of the most unattractive qualities when it comes to temperature regulation when you're a quadriplegic, that's for sure.
Oh, I bet. So let's touch on that a little bit. Rhiannon, you've been awarded a string of accolades, nominated for Women of Future Award, recipient of 2 Australia Day Awards for Access and Inclusion, Ambassador for Wings for Life. You've started up TNS, the Next Step, a not-for-profit organisation for people with spinal injuries. So I would say that these were a lot of events and things that you've established that you probably didn't anticipating setting up when you were at school. This was probably not where your vision of your life started, was it?
Absolutely not. Look, when I was at school, all I worried about was how I could get out of school, to be honest. Look, I've definitely been able to do and experience more things that I could ever have dreamed and imagined I could. And look, I'm not mad about it. Obviously, the world has a way of making things happen and showing you purpose in one way or another. And look, life is here to live, and I'm definitely enjoying every single moment of it.
Fantastic. And obviously we're talking about, today, one of the things we want to touch on, obviously, is a moment in time where, an absolute freak, unknown accident happened, which completely changed the trajectory of your life. And, doing a little bit of background research on yourself and being quite a strong empath myself, I was just thinking, whoa, just imagine, that, hearing the doctor say to you, look, sorry, but you're actually not going to be able to walk again. What was this? What was going through your mind then, and what over that, subsequent months?
So what happened?
Yeah, let's see. What happened first, and then what?
1 minute you're off Bali drinking cocktails, having a nice time, and the next minute you're in a hospital that's collapsing in an earthquake, and life changed
to add
dramatically.
insult to injury. It wasn't bad enough. Then there was the worst earthquake I'd had, I think, or something at the same time.
Yeah, so tell us about the day that changed your life forever.
Look, Bali was a home away from home for me. It was a place that Mum and I would go to every year. So I've got one of those mums who's now in her 50s but still thinks she's in her 20s. So we've always had a super close relationship. Every year around tax time, one of us would jump on the phone to the other one and say, all right, we've just done our tax return. Let's book our flights to Bali, go on our shopping sprees and buy all of our genuine fake Louis Vuitton bags. But this particular year was really special, this trip, because I was taking my best friend with me and we were celebrating her birthday while we were over there. And of course, the night that I had my injury was the celebrations of her birthday. That being said, you know, you think about Bali and, like you said, cocktails and partying and things like that. I was never a big party goer. I worked full-time and studied full-time. I was a veterinary nurse before my injury, and I was always like the designated driver whenever we went out. So I was never like a wild child when it came to partying, but definitely had one or two cocktails while I was in Bali. But the night that I had my injury, actually was as sober as anything. So it's generally one of the first questions people ask me when I talk about my injury. They say, you know, were you drunk? Because yes, a lot of these injuries are a result of being under the influence.
Yeah,
but
Bali has that reputation, doesn't it?
Sorry?
Bali has that reputation. Yeah,
right?
Most people
Absolutely.
have an accident, and it's a result of way too many beers or cocktails.
Absolutely. Well, yes, look, unfortunately, this was just a fluke instance, and I literally dove into a resort swimming pool that was meant to be deep, but it was shallow. So the middle of the swimming pool was actually what was considered deep, and the sides were shallow. So I dove in like I would any deep side of a swimming pool, and I hit my head at the bottom and instantly broke my neck and my back. So
I'm actually having a reaction to that.
I remained completely conscious throughout the whole ordeal. So I do remember it like it was yesterday. So it's a pretty easy story to tell these days. Obviously, I experienced the emotional roller coaster, and we can talk about that more. But yeah, I remember being put into the back of an ambulance, which was like a beat up old panel van, and taken to the closest hospital. I had a CT scan that confirmed that the broken fragments of my vertebrae were piercing into both sides of my spinal cord. My mum was told if I didn't have emergency surgery in Bali that my spinal cord could be severed and I could die. And my mum tells the story about how the surgeon actually said to my mum, if this was my daughter, I probably wouldn't want her operated on in Bali, but we don't really have a choice here. Wow. So we didn't have a choice. And
but when you hit the bottom of the pool, Rhiannon, did you feel it straight away, or did you just feel like I bumped my head? Could you get out, swim, or float?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. I hit my head, and I felt a lot of pressure running through my body. And yeah, as I was trying to move parts of my body to turn myself around or get myself, you know, up out of the water, that's when I really started to freak out because I knew something was wrong. Not for a moment did I think that I had broken my neck, though. There was no knowing that I had broken my neck. I honestly just thought that I hit my head so hard at the bottom of the swimming pool that my body had just gone into shock. And obviously, you know, as I was being pulled out of the pool by my best friend and trying to move, I really started freaking out. But even though I couldn't move, when people were touching me, I could still feel their touch, which is very odd for somebody with my level of injury. You generally lose all feeling and sensation. So the fact that I could still feel touch, I guess everybody was reassuring me that, you know, everything was going to be okay because I could still feel. So, yes, it was a pretty horrific ordeal. I'm very lucky that I had travel insurance. Otherwise, I definitely would not be here today to tell my story. And I had my emergency surgery 24 hours after I was meant to have it due to waiting for the surgery and Bali having a 7.6 magnitude earthquake. So
wow, what are the odds of that?
Trauma center was falling around us.
That's unbelievable.
The timing could not have been more inconvenient, I guess.
How was that 24 hours? Like, what did that feel like? What was going through your mind during that? Does the body go into shock to some degree? Are you conscious of what's going on? You feel like it's all going to be okay? I mean, not many people would have such an intense 24-hour period in their life.
Look, I was in and out of consciousness at that point. I was being loaded up with all kinds of drugs in Bali, let me tell you. I remember having that green stick pretty much as soon as I was put into the ambulance, and from there on, everything was a bit blurry. I do remember experiencing quite a lot of pain, and I was frightened. I just remember being absolutely frightened that we were going to die in the earthquake. And, you know, I remember saying to my mum, we're going to die. And my mum was one of those people that always says the wrong thing, like at any time. So her reassuring words were, well, Rhiannon, if we're going to go, at least we're going to go together. And I was just like, oh my God. But, we survived, and I spent 2.5 weeks in the hospital in Bali waiting for the travel insurance company to bring a doctor and a nurse from Australia to Bali to fly me home. By the time the doctor and the nurse got there, I was almost dead. So both my lungs had collapsed. I had blood clots in both of my legs. I hadn't been in the bathroom for 2.5 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And we found out when I got back to Australia that my neck wasn't even secure on my shoulders. So in Australia, they take everything out that was broken, replace it with titanium. In Bali, they just left everything in and wired it up with stainless steel. So it was 3 additional surgeries when I got back to Australia to correct what Bali had attempted to fix, and a pretty poor prognosis.
That's just there's nothing good about that little bit of conversation right there. I could feel my neck shriveling in terror.
But to see how you show up today, on this podcast, this video, obviously we can see you here, and I mean, there's got to be some well of strength that you've tapped into, to when you heard those words that you're not going to walk, and you're like, you know what, you've obviously proven them wrong, that you can actually move, you can walk, and things like that. What was it that drove you? What was that intrinsic fire that you found, or imagine searching some of the darkness, that you then grabbed onto and allowed you to move forward and do what you've done over the last few years?
I think my age had a lot to do with it, if I'm honest. I think that because I still had goals and aspirations, I had a lot of things that I wanted to do, and I believe that played a great part in it. But if you ask my mum, she'll just tell you that I've never been good at hearing no. And I'm a Scorpio, and I'm an only child, so I'm as stubborn as all hell. But look, that being said, it wasn't always brightness. It was truly an emotional roller coaster. And there were some really dark days that my mum had to really try and lift me out of. And I think for probably the first 3 years, I experienced so many of those days where I just said, why? Like, why did this happen to me? And I'd call them spinal cord injury days, because there'd just be days where I just hated this injury so much and the effect that it had had on my life. But I'm 11 years post-injury now, and my life has changed dramatically, and it's a new life, as human beings. And I think you guys can probably relate to this with COVID and everything that's happened over 2020. We're humans, we learn to adapt. And, that's exactly what I think not what I think, but what I know I did. And to be honest, I do more now with my life than I ever did before. And I never ran before my injury. And that's one of the things that people said to me, oh, you'll be running again in no time, like my friends. And I was like, have you met me?
Yeah.
Didn't run in the first place.
Yeah.
So those dark moments, Rhiannon, because I think it's quite topical in this time of year. I know there's a lot of people that are really struggling, and your dark moments were around a loss of mobility, and clearly as a young woman, so many elements of your life were going to be touched by that. And now we see a lot of people who are feeling dark and down because maybe they have to downgrade their car, or they're going to have to do without their ski holiday. What's your advice to people who are dark but holding on to things?
One of the things that was continuously drilled into me, or was, I guess, they had tried to drill into me, was acceptance. It was always, you need to accept that you have to sell your RAV4 that you've only had for 3 months, or you have to accept that your life is going to be in a wheelchair. And a significant conversation I remember having with one of the nurses was that it was the era of skinny leg jeans when I had my injury. So for both, men and women. And I was getting ready to go to, because funny story, before my injury, I bought tickets to see Britney Spears. And my mum was adamant that in my electric wheelchair, in the back of a an accessible van, she was going to get me to Rod Laver Arena to see Britney Spears by hook or by crook. And she was trying to get me dressed and trying to get these skinny leg jeans on me. And the nurse had turned around and said to my mum, you just have to accept that she's never going to wear skinny leg jeans again. And my mum was like, she's going to wear skinny leg jeans. And mum was like rolling me over and throwing my legs over her shoulders. And that's just the thing. I don't believe we need to accept anything. We need to learn how to adapt.
I think that's right. That's the key thing. There's adaptation, not acceptance. And
Exactly.
you do hear it a lot. I think I think a lot of the medical professionals and things have a certain responsibility to, I guess, tell us the worst case scenario. So let's say if you've got there's something coming, you've got a 1 in 10,000 chance of that happening. They don't say you've got a 9,999% chance of it not happening. So it seems to be, I think that's kind of the frame, but there's a number of people that I've spoken to in my life as well in the past that have had, things in situations happen where they've been told this is what's going to happen. And they're like, you know what? I don't agree with that. I'm going to change it. And it's that internal willpower and ability, as you said, to adapt, where they've actually overcome these odds, and being able to do things that doctors and specialists and things have said that's not actually possible, which is, I think that power of self-belief is such an important part of it. And where did you find, I guess, you said that first 3 years was challenging. Where did you find, I guess, that tipping point when you really started to become that version of yourself
to own it,
that owned it and went, I'm going to wear this as a badge of honor, and I'm going to use this to drive me forward? When did that kind of happen?
Look, I think it really did start when I was in hospital, if I'm completely honest. I think, just to touch on everything you just said there's a huge difference between know and I don't know. And I think when you're at that extremely vulnerable period of, being in the acute ward post a huge physical trauma, hope is something that we need to thrive on. And I think the lack of that is what was my driving force to make sure that if I was going to have any kind of a life after this injury, then I needed to work for it. And within myself, it was, give it all I've got, as opposed to just give up. I was one of 20 people on the spinal ward, and I can honestly tell you that 85% of the people on that ward would just sit in their wheelchairs, if they were able to use wheelchairs, and just stare out the window. And it was so evidently clear in Australia for somebody who wanted to improve their quality of life that there was no available options here. And it was just, there were so many gaps that we were finding as a family, and within meeting so many people that had been affected by this injury as well. Like, I had my injury in Bali, which meant there was no compensation for me whatsoever from the Australian government. So my family had to fundraise for everything from a wheelchair to catheters, so I was able to go to the bathroom, you name it. We had to fundraise for it. Medications. My mum was selling her car. We were on the verge of having to sell our house, and I begged my parents to not sell our house because I needed somewhere to come home to. And it was the fact that we had to do all of these things that, was really just adding. There was nothing that was easily accessible to somebody who wanted to improve. And it was an ongoing argument when I was in the hospital as to why they weren't working on my entire body, because my goal was to walk again. And, the feedback that I was getting from the medics overall was just not good enough. So it's a very long story, but the long and short of it was there was just nothing here for anybody who wanted to have a real quality of life after this injury. And it was upon going backwards and forth from Australia to America to do my rehab that we came back to Australia, and I just went, you know what? I need to take this and I need to find purpose within it. And it's that old saying, be the change that you want to see in the world. And I was just meeting too many people that had so much potential. And yeah, it was just so many little things. And I really did dedicate the first, I'm going to say 4 years of my life post spinal cord injury purely to my therapy. But it was when I realized that my life had become so routine and I was losing the ability to just be happy and go out and be with friends, that again, I had to keep making changes. And I think you just like an able-bodied person, you evolve over the years. You realize what's missing. You realize what you need to work on. You have your good and your bad days. The bad days make the good days even better. And there was just so many things that when I was down, they were able to pump me back up. And it was also the knowing of, no matter how bad that day was or how bad I believed my situation was on a particular day or time, I was meeting people who were so much worse off. And again, that was becoming a driving force for me. So just keep going.
You just said then, it kind of in passing, it's like, that old saying, be the change. Now, this podcast is called The Few, right? Mm-hmm. That may be an old saying, yes, but most people don't actually live it, right?
No, they treat it as that's fluffy
that
stuff.
Thing over there.
Oh, there's that Tony Robbins nonsense that everyone's talking about. Oh, it's all me, is it? Oh, yeah.
But what I observe is that you actually have been an element and an instrument of change because of what's happened, and one of those few that actually goes from talking about it to doing it, and obviously you've started the Next Step foundation, not-for-profit organisation to support other people in similar situations, and how's been going down that path and helping other people also helped you in your journey?
In the early days of being injured, one of the things that was continuously being said to me was that everything happens for a reason. And I clearly remember being like, oh my goodness, to everyone who's saying this to me, you're so lucky that I'm paralyzed, because
I want to punch you in the head.
To the point where it was being said that many times that I was just like, oh, I just want to bop you people over the head, like you don't know what I'm going through. Yeah. And 11 years post, I know that this happened to me for a reason, because I'm aware of what I've been able to achieve. And I think it even took me quite some time to be able to sit back and just kind of look at what I've been able to achieve over the past 11 years. Like I said, I'm doing so many things that I never ever could have imagined. But the next step has given me a reason to get out of bed every single day. And physically, that's not always an easy task to do. What I've seen people achieve within that facility. So just to give you a little bit of background about what we do, we are a whole body facility. So we literally just treat the body as a whole. We have mindset coaching, we have exercise physiology, and then we have the holistic modalities as well, like naturopathy, acupuncture, and massage. There's not a part of the body we don't work on. And the mindset is just as important as the rest of the body, because you guys, I'm sure, would know, as able-bodied human beings, if you don't want to work out, if you don't feel good about working out, you're not going to work out, are you? You know what I mean? So
I felt pressure right then.
We are treating people who, like myself, I hated exercising prior to my injury. I was never somebody who was big into fitness. And I was literally having to go to the gym 3 to 4 times a week, because if I didn't, my body was going to shut down, or my body wasn't going to improve in any way, shape, or form. So, being able to not just see smiles on people's faces, because you couldn't imagine just how sad some of these people are that have had their lives ripped away from them. And the Next Step is a place where a lot of people literally just come to leave with that smile. You know what I mean? And I called it the Next Step because it was the next step. It is the next step. Our hospital system, it's great. Don't get me wrong. Being sick and experiencing different things in hospitals from America to Bali, like I can honestly say we have a great health system, but our health system is about getting you independent in your wheelchair and sending you out into the real world. Whereas the next step is to get you happy within your life, get you independent, doing the things that you loved doing prior to your injury in an adaptive way, not just throwing them away and saying, I can't do it anymore. Like we actually don't believe in the word I can't or impossible. It's about, finding other ways to do things and setting goals. It's really not rocket science. When I explain it, when I talk about it out loud, I'm like, it's not rocket science.
It's like not though, but it's the belief in that, and particularly the goal setting piece. Yeah, everyone knows they should set goals, but so many people don't. And I just want to go back to something that you just said before, which was I had to exercise 3-4 times a week, or I would shut down, or I could potentially die. What is life like when choice is taken away? Because one of the challenges I think in life today is you go, I want to get fit. You Google get fit, and you are overwhelmed with so much information and so many ways and so much choice that a lot of people don't make a choice. They just become overwhelmed. What do you think changed in your life when? I mean, it's sad that choice gets taken away from us to some degree, and I look at my children who have so much choice, and I think this is not necessarily a good thing. I think you just need less and just something to focus on. How did your life transform as a result of choice being taken away and influencing your goal setting and activities?
Well, I think when you have something taken away from you, you just realize how much you took that little something for granted. At the point of being newly injured, I wasn't able to feed myself. I wasn't able to do I was a 20-year-old woman who couldn't even go to the bathroom on her own. So, when I had this injury, and when pretty much everybody I know has had their injury, initially everybody's goal is to walk again, because that's the bigger picture. We have this innate feeling that without being able to walk again, we're not going to have a fun and fulfilled life. And as time progresses and you start getting out there and, with assistance like somewhere like the Next Step, you start to realize that when you can, feed yourself or hug your loved one, you go, wow, I didn't actually realize how important that was for me. And again, I think everybody can relate, because COVID took so much away from so many of us that I know a lot of people have definitely made changes within their lives. But, for me, it was definitely about holding gratitude for the things that I was now being able to do, I guess, that I was told I wouldn't be able to do. That, just kept, no pun intended, but kept the wheels moving.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. I tell the worst wheelchair jokes.
That's all right.
I don't even mean for them to be jokes. It's just how I roll.
We're both dads, so it's just great stuff. It's good stuff as far as we're concerned.
It's new material potentially. But
just one other thing that I'm keen to explore with you. I have an autoimmune disease called ankylosing spondylitis, and part of that is having a problem with your gut. And I was admitted to hospital once because my intestines had shut down effectively. And in hospital, immediately a surgeon comes in and says to me, right, we've got to go take you into surgery, section you, cut that bit out. And I was like, sounds pretty horrible. Can I have a bit of time to think about it? No, this is the way, and there's a risk of this, and we have to deal with it right now. We have to catheterize you, do all this stuff. I'm like, no, I don't want any of that stuff, though. The medical system has limits, and it has risk profiles and budgets, and ultimately you get a level of care that it's allowed to give you. How important is it, though, for anyone with any condition of a medical basis to own their own recovery, to own the research, the study, to understand how this affliction or injury applies specifically to them? Because I would imagine through your work post-injury and helping rehabilitate others, there's quite a bit that's the same, but I would imagine there's quite a lot that's different either from person to person.
Whew, that is a big question. I guess there's two sides to this. So obviously when I was first injured in Bali, I didn't even have the ability to make my own decisions. So I thank the heavens that my mum and I are so much alike that we would have chose the same path. But taking back power is something so I am a life coach. I'm the mindset coach at the Next Step, and taking back your power and having the ability to still have your voice. And that's something that, above all things that were taken away from me, I always came back to the fact that I could make my own decisions. After the trauma side of things, within the first couple of months of going from the acute ward over to the spinal unit, I had my voice. So I was able to have conversations. that I was able to make decisions and make my own choices for. And I think that was really important, probably more so than ever, because everything else had been taken away, from my dignity to, you know, everything, you name it. So that is something that I really try to encourage and educate. If you have the ability to speak up and take back power, you know, power is everything when it comes to making decisions that are your life. And you know, I can't talk about that highly enough. If you've got it, you need to hold on to it, and if you don't have it, then you need to fight for it. And that's one of the consistent battles that we have with the next step. Is everything that we do within the walls of our facility is not written in a textbook. Therefore, from the medic's view, it doesn't exist. Well, if they came in and they saw it, you know, they may have a different perception. But in the meantime, I just encourage and inspire and I guess motivate people just to use your voice.
Mm-hmm. The one thing you can hold on to is that voice which gives you choice. That's great. It's great.
Oh, I like that. The voice gives you choice.
Look at that.
Bit of a tagline there.
It's pretty corny.
It's
pretty corny. It passes
We
the
love
test.
the cornies.
So by the sounds of it, you know, the what you've created to date, it kind of sounds like you're only just warming up. You know, what are your goals? What do you see? You know, you said it as a 19, 20-year-old, you already had, you know, goals and aspirations and things, but some of them may have changed and adapted in the journey so far. But where do you see yourself, you know, going? What are your goals over the next 5 years or so?
Well, look, at 11 years post, I think the significance of my spinal cord injury to my life, from my perception, is probably about 15%. So in the last 11 years, my goals have changed dramatically. You know, my goal was initially to walk again. Well, yes, I can walk short distances and I bounce off walls. You know, I was married. My goal was to walk down the aisle and I did that. Luckily for me, I have a dysfunctional family, so I have a stepdad and a biological dad, and I used both of them to get me down that aisle. But, you know, and then I had a really horrendous marriage breakdown, which I went through as well. So, you know, just because I have a spinal cord injury, that doesn't put the rest of the world on hold. You know, it doesn't give me a bubble that protects me from everything else that an able-bodied person would go through. It kind of just gives me a little bit more armor required to get through life. But, you know, my goals to date are, I've spent the last 2 years really working on being independent. When I say independent, I mean independent on my own, not independent with a spinal cord injury, just independent in my own life. You know, I had been with my ex-husband. Well, I met him when I was 14 and I'm 32 now. So I was 30 when we separated and I'd never been on my own. So it was really about finding happiness, and the next step was a huge platform for me to hold on to and to encourage and motivate me to get through the dark times that, you know, had nothing to do with my injury, but I had next step to fall back on because I had created this family dynamic of support. And I think during that time, the significance of how the next step played a part in my life became so much more obvious. My goals now, well, I've just recently moved to Geelong. I moved to Geelong in the middle of the COVID peak.
Oh, wow.
Which is crazy.
Everyone's going the other way.
At 4 o'clock one morning and decided I needed to move and I wanted to be close to the water. So I packed up my life and moved here, and here I am. I'm raising a 10-month-old golden retriever at the moment who keeps me extremely busy. So my goal is for her to not be a puppy.
I don't think that ever ends.
But, you know, inevitably, I've spent so much of my injury living in the realm of spinal cord injury, which kind of contradicts what I just said, but I mean working within the spinal cord injury community, that now, you know, I've decided over the next 12 months that I'm really going to focus on my brand and, you know, my story and getting my story out in the universe. Everybody I meet and tell my story to says, you need to write a book. So I think that's definitely on the top of the priority list.
Good on you. That's not an easy endeavour, let me tell you. But no doubt it'll be awesome. You mentioned a word before that resonated with me, and I think it's something that people attach to successful people, and that's the concept of armor. And putting this armor on when we do things, and a lot of people wear armor, but unfortunately the armor's too thick, or the armor creates an issue where they're just a pain in the ass to be around, and sensitive people, or the way the world is today. We're seeing a lot more of that, and I think that we're seeing people that are a bit more disingenuous or protective or wearing the mask. What's your advice? I mean, you of all people in the world, you would have the best excuse to have thick armor on everything that you do, right? You've had your personal space invaded for many years. You haven't been able to do basic functions we all take for granted. What's your hot tip for people to be vulnerable, to take the armor off?
I was just going to say, we were talking about power. Vulnerability is power. I think this comes down to, look, some call it armor. I call it a bullshit filter. And I also say that it was a superpower that I was given. But, given amongst all the crap that I experienced with my injury and the crap I've had to overcome. But again, what I've gone through is just something. Every single person on this planet experiences trauma, whether it be physical or emotional. We've all been there. We all deal with our grief in our own individual separate ways. For me, though, I'm always somebody who likes to remain very grounded. So, I'm quite a humble person. I thrive. Sean, you were talking about you being an empath. I'm a huge empath, which is why I do what I do in the public speaking realm. I thrive off making people happy, so I don't think that it's even within my personality that I could, not be open to being vulnerable. I think vulnerability is definitely power, and we've got to feel our feelings. I realized that so much after my marriage separation. I was actually diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, after my marriage separation. When I was initially injured, I was told I needed to speak to counselors, and I was 20 years old, and I was like, nobody can tell me, how to feel. And then, I'd experienced a physical trauma, but when my marriage broke down, it was all emotional. And I've always been someone who's thrown my grief into a project, hence the next step. But, when I was diagnosed with PTSD, I just went, it doesn't surprise me. Like my mum's exactly the same, and I went, all right, well, it's time for me to really feel. And I have to say that COVID hasn't been so bad for me, because it's actually given me the ability to stop and feel a lot of things. And I think we need to feel to be able to process properly.
So hard, isn't it?
And I think the arm is great, but it's also can just be a tool.
It's hard to find that balance. And again, this is, I think, where the few manage to find this balance between having the armor, not having the armor, being vulnerable, being a little bit more cautious. And I think there's a real skill, and it's a skill that you can only learn over time by putting yourself out there, constantly taking those risks with your personal space, with the risk of being humiliated, the risk of being laughed at, the risk of being pulled down. All of these things that happen I think is where you start to refine that balance.
I think the vulnerability piece, though, and only really being someone to learn that skill, I guess, in say the last 5 years. Prior to that, I think I had a huge amount of armor bullshit filter on, and
just a big soft.
Yeah, that's it. Mate, that's it. But what I found was that it was that belief that it's a weakness. And what I've seen, and obviously Brene Brown's got some great content on this as well, and it's that it's such a strength. Vulnerability has allowed me in the last 5 years to establish more incredibly deep, meaningful relationships than I did in the previous 40 years of my life. And that's through actually being vulnerable.
One of my favorite Brene Brown quotes actually regarding vulnerability is that rejection is redirection to something better. And that's something that I know when I was building the next step and I was getting all the, no, you can't do this and you can't do that. And I was hitting all the red tapes. Like we even had moments as a not-for-profit organisation, being the only of its kind in Australia, we came so close so many times to having to close our doors. And, every time there was one of those moments where we really felt like we'd hit rock bottom, it was like, all right, well, we're here and we have nothing. And I guess this comes back down to, also having my injury and not being funded. When you have nothing, you have to work, don't you?
Yep.
So
yeah, being hungry is not a bad thing.
Yes.
Being hungry, you just that piece where it's like, I have to do something to survive. There's a real purity in that. So Rhiannon, you said we could go access all areas, so it's your own fault for us to do a deep dive.
I set myself up.
But can you talk through with us what's involved with recovering from such a deep breakdown in a personal relationship? I can only imagine what it's like being with someone from the age of 14, suffering a life-changing incident, and then having that rock or that other half disappear. And with so many relationships under pressure with COVID now, and generally speaking, what were some of the emotions and the pain you felt there? How did you deal with that tumult? And what would be your top tips for people who are struggling to let go of those sort of situations?
I'm going to give you radical honesty, and then I'm going to give you action. Okay, so there was a lot of Valium, and I can say that because I'm very holistic and I don't even take Panadol. So when I was nearly injured, I refused to take a lot of the medications that was scripted to me. But when I was going through this relationship breakdown, my mum was literally force feeding me Valium just to get me to sleep, because let me tell you, I honestly felt when this was happening to me that it was 10 times worse than what I had experienced when I had my injury. And I think it was because it had happened because of another person. You know what I mean? Like it didn't have to happen, but it happened. So it was that knowing that this was all happening to you, like your heart was literally being pulled out and stomped on because of another person. So you experience, that anger, the sadness, the why, the everything. So there was Valium involved, prescribed, obviously. There was a lot of wine.
You make a good point though, because I think a lot of people when they're in pain, they choose not to take medication, or if it's a mental health related issue, that there's something wrong with that. And from our experience on the show and at a personal level, sometimes it's the best thing to do, because you can't control what's going on there. That chemistry and those neural pathways are out of control.
It was hideous. But let me tell you, 2 days post this all happening and knowing the need for this Valium to help me sleep, like I said, I didn't even take Panadol. I actually said to my mum, I need to go and I need to speak to someone. I need to understand. So, my ex did have a mental health issue that I had no knowledge. Well, I knew about it, but I didn't know the background of this particular mental health disorder. So I actually said to my mum, I need to go and speak to a counsellor, because I need the knowledge behind this particular illness, and I need support. And I cannot stress how much that changed for me. And to this day, 2.5 years later, I've still got a therapist on call. I'm a strong person, but I'm human. And even the strongest of us still need, like I always say to my coaching clients, even life coaches need coaching. So I can't stress enough how important it is to speak out when you need that support. I remember calling Beyond Blue at 3:00 in the morning. Like I ended up living with my mum at the time, and she would go away for work. She was working overseas. So I was just alone, and I'd be on the phone to Beyond Blue because I hadn't experienced the darkness emotionally that I was experiencing during this. And it was such a huge process. It was surrounding myself with people that I knew I could rely on, because I've always been somebody who a lot of people rely on. So it was pulling in, that additional extended family of friends and support networks that, really could just take me out and have a laugh and tell me stupid jokes that were worse than mine, but I'd still laugh at. It's just... there's just so many things. I could go on and on and on, but, I definitely have to say that speaking to somebody professionally was an absolute game changer for me. And it was something that I don't want to say I always looked down my nose on, but I always I was doubtful because I was like, nobody can understand what I'm feeling, especially when I was in hospital. Why should I speak to a counsellor? They're all able-bodied. They're not going to understand what I'm feeling. They haven't gone through this. And whether it's, evolution, growing up, age, I'm not sure, but I definitely now know how important it is to have that additional support, because like I said, we don't always have to experience something on a physical level that's traumatic for us to go, oh, okay, well, something's happened, we need direction, or we need support, or we need the tools to improve or change our lives. That shouldn't have to happen. We shouldn't have to experience that trauma, but everybody has in some way. So it really didn't matter who I was talking with. I was getting what I needed from my people as well as my professional support.
And are there similarities, or is it quite different? I guess jump in a pool, hit my head, I break my neck. It's fairly binary. I get that. But the other emotional injuries, it's not that cut and dried, is it? There's a lot of trying to understand and compute and control and turn back time and all of these different issues. How much of what you went through with your injury were you able to apply, or was it just completely just a totally different type of turmoil?
It was completely different. And again, I don't know if it was because I was 20 and, my whole mindset was completely different to what it has been, I guess, in the last 5 years. And that's what I mean, like whether it's evolution itself, whether it's age, I'm not sure, whether it's a certain experience, whether it was literally just the circumstance that I was in. I'm not sure, but I know it helped.
Yeah, and that's the thing you see far too often, is that we don't actually ask for support. I had clinical depression for 17 years from my late teens, and it took me until I was nearly in my mid-30s before I actually asked for support and got professional support. And whilst there was a bit of a false start with the first one, it got me to then, okay, well, if that's not working, then I'll try an alternative. It sort of unlocked the door. And that changed everything. Like, it literally changed everything. And within about 6 months of making that decision, I'd never gone back to a clinically depressed state ever since then. And that's 11, 12 years ago now or something. And but I'd resisted it, whether it's a physical injury or an emotional thing. And often people do say the emotional stuff can be the stuff that hurts the most and the deepest. That you've got to ask for support, whether it's a friend or whether it's a family member, or if you can't talk to them, go to someone independent, because they understand how we work. They don't need to understand exactly our situation, because they understand how this human psyche works and how emotion works. And it's so important for people to ask for help, particularly this year. 2020's kind of pushed mental health to the forefront. It's clearly getting a lot more funding and stuff behind it, but it's also becoming even more normal for people to go, hey, mate, I need a bit of help. I'm not coping. I think that's something that is becoming vastly more commonplace.
One of the other things that I'd like to talk to you about, Rhiannon, is we often feel like we're different. We feel that society doesn't accept us. We have all of these strange feelings about being accepted with those around us. And I imagine people with a disability or an injury that's altering. What's your advice to people who are struggling? Because as humans, we love to conform. I mean, we all feel like we need to conform to the Instagram portrayal of humanity. What's your advice or experiences in terms of coming to terms with being different?
The biggest message that I would put out there for anyone experiencing this, and I guess first I'd ask, what, like, is it fear related? What? There's so many questions upon this question, but never lose sense of self. If these people, I'm trying to find the best way to explain this. I would just say never lose sense of who you were before. So the conversations that you were having prior to these things happening to you, keep having them. We don't have to conform. Why do we feel like we need to conform? And that's where I'm going with the whole fear association to this question. I think that fear, it gives us direct access to where we need work. So if we're feeling like we should conform, I would kind of be spinning that around and asking myself why, because I can only speak for personal experience, but there has never been a moment for me, and this is just me, in the last 11 years, where I've ever felt like I needed to change something about me on a physical level because of what had happened to me. The work that I've done internally has obviously helped me on a physical level, but I've never, ever, ever changed my sense of self, if that makes sense. And I've never doubted my ability to just keep doing without being put into a minority or a box. You know what I mean? Like, I've actually used so much of who I am on a physical level to get the things that I need. You know, there's so many, and when I say get the things that I need, I mean, you know, pull in the awareness and pull in the advocacy and make people aware of this being my situation, but it being so many other people's situations as well. You know, one of the things that I guess I heard for quite some time when I started to get out and about using my voice was that, and don't get me wrong, I don't look glamorous today because it is 32 degrees and I don't have aircon, but, you know, I was the pretty girl in the wheelchair, you know, and one of the things I used to hear all the time was, oh my gosh, you're so pretty, like, or you're too pretty to be in a wheelchair. And I'd just go,
oh wow,
what? Like, there was no etiquette around my situation for the outside world. And again, like, it came back down to, you know, do I let that, do I internalize that and let that change me or make me feel like I need to be somebody else so that how people would see me would be how they'd want to see me? Or do I take that and I use that as that tool belt, as that armor, and, you know, I go out and I really, can I say shit? I'm going to say shit anyway.
You're allowed. You
go
can
out
say any
and
word
rock
you like.
the shit out of everything that I've got and make a change. You know, use it, really use it. And there's no conforming here. I'm a true believer in just be your goddamn self.
You're incredibly, incredibly positive. And was that a trait that existed prior to the injury, or is that something that you've developed in this journey since then?
Positive or confident?
Oh, positive. No, I
positive.
Both. But
the confidence is clear.
Because I get confident, and I feel like some people put the two together and get a little bit mixed up. But you know what? No, I don't think I was. I think that it's something that I've just had to learn to be. You know, like, I want to be happy. Happiness is a choice. So, and I've read the Brene Browns. I've read all the self-help books. I watched The Secret when I was in hospital, you know. I'm a huge believer in the power of manifestation. I'm a huge believer in, you know, what you put out there, you give back. If I roll out of bed and I feel like I'm going to have a shitty day, I'm going to just completely fake it till I make it when it comes to that. And I'm going to pretend to be happy. And then I believe that I become happy. But I'm also here. You know what I mean? Like, I've literally cheated death numerous times and I'm here. So what's not to be positive about?
Absolutely fantastic answer to that question.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that, isn't there, in terms of having that extra time. It's almost like there was a new medication came out for my condition 15 years ago, and my life today without that invention would be fundamentally different to what it is today. And that ability to just go, well, you know what, the sliding doors have gone this way for me, and Rhiannon, as you point out, you've got a choice from that day forward. You can go down the sad, lonely route, or you can go down this new opportunity. And I think that the minute you say yes, and the minute you say can, that just sets up a forward momentum. And you sort of said it before. I'm not sure you said like keep going, but just you've got to keep moving. No matter what, life is going to happen. So just keep moving forward.
And the universe will conspire with you to do that.
Yeah. So do you have any mantras, or do you have any kind of like cognitive processes you go through when your mental state is letting you down?
My favorite one, and I love it so much, I have it tattooed down my arm. Sometimes things fall apart so that things can come back together. Now, for me, this is a huge mantra, but like I've said so many times during this session with you guys, is that we shouldn't have to experience something so big on a trauma-based level for us to realize that we do have a choice. Wake up and choose happiness tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, it's easy for you and I to say because we've had these things that have happened to us and we're like, yes, we made a choice. We chose to be happy. Now, day one of the rest of my life, it's like, everyone's now starting to make their plans for 2021 or set their goals. It's a new week. It's a new day. We have so many choices. It doesn't matter what time of the day it is. It doesn't matter what day it is, what year it is. Wake up and choose happiness.
Yep, I love it.
We can reset ourselves at any point. And, this is something that I say to everyone. If you don't have all the things that you want or you desire, you will always have choice.
Absolutely. And I suppose this might be something that relates to this question, but you've clearly had a very steep learning and growth curve over the last 11 years to help drive you and inspire you and allow you to grow and mature and become the version of yourself that you are today. If you were to go back to a teenage version of yourself pre-injury with one key piece of advice, what advice would you go back and tell yourself?
Just exactly what we just spoke about. Choose happiness. I grew up an only child, and like I mentioned earlier, I did come from a dysfunctional family, and I did, looking back now, I did have days where I was that teenager that would lock herself in the bedroom and blast the stereo speakers. When I had my injury, or the night of my injury, I can honestly say that I felt like at that point in my life I had my shit together. But, can I honestly say that I was happy? It blows my mind that 11 years after something so significant happened to me that changed my life, that I can actually be this happy. It blows my mind, but I don't disbelieve in it and I don't doubt why I'm so happy. But if I could write a letter to 20-year-old me, it would literally just say, just choose happiness. Like from your friendship circle to your relationships to your career, to the people you call your family, happiness.
It's
just happiness.
It's pretty simple, isn't it? Really, if you think about it.
It is.
But I think to go back to something you said very early on, I think you're right. I think everything does happen for a reason, and at the time, we don't know what that reason is. And I always grew up with my mum always saying that, everything happens for a reason, love. And you would say, it doesn't. Like, this is BS. But I think through our chat today around it, what's become clear to me is maybe it is true. Maybe everything does happen for a reason.
I've had people to date fight me on that now, fight me on the belief of that. People who are in a worse physical space than I am have said, well, look at my situation. And I say, well, yeah, look deep into your situation. And I'm sure you guys are going to have listeners who are not going to agree with that statement that everything happens for a reason, because in that time, in that moment, in the space that they're in, they may honestly feel like we spoke about that, they're in the worst space possible, or, the worst moment in time. But look deep. Look really deep. Look at the decisions that you're making, the plans that you're setting. Are you even setting plans? Are you even making goals? What are you going to do tomorrow? Have you made that plan? Because if you don't have goals and if you don't have aspirations, then you don't have anything to look forward to.
Planning, goals, positivity. everything happens
Seems
for a
to
reason,
come
and we've got the recurring themes coming up all over again. It's kind of
Well, yeah, like if you're not making those plans, they're not going to happen.
no, absolutely, Rhiannon. Thanks so much for taking time out of your incredibly hot Geelong day to chat to Sean and myself, despite being uncomfortable. Hugely insightful, and again, I just find myself, when we're having these conversations, my mind just wanders, and so many things that you said there reinforced some stuff I need to have a look at in myself again, because 2020 hasn't been ideal for me as much as anyone else, and I think there's quite a lot there, Sean, that people can take away.
Absolutely, but really appreciate your openness and sharing your journey with us to help inspire some of our listeners as well.
And that wraps up another episode of The Few. Thank you to our partners, Afterburner, for team building, development and alignment. We understand now how important it is to have the right people around you. Get them on board with where you want to go. Momentum Media, the largest industry publisher in the country, connecting your business to the Australian community. ICMI, Australia's premier speaker bureau, representing the few that do fulfill their life's purpose. And finally, Sean's Inner Circle, the business coaching organisation for small and medium enterprises looking to make that next step. Thanks again for listening in and downloading today. Please leave a review on whatever platform you are currently listening to this podcast, and reach out to our partners who can help you make the transition to the few. Look forward to the book.
Thank you, guys. I'll be sure to make sure you guys have a signed copy.
Excellent. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Cheers.
See you later, guys. Thank you.